Alright, so here we have another example of Amphibia, I think, really stepping back within its own stride, with the episodes The Root of Evil and The Core and the King, which I just thought were great. I thought these were great episodes. The latter of them more so than the former, but both of these were quite good. In fact, The Root of Evil referenced a character who we just got a reference to recently, who I didn't even remember existed before that other reference. And now it seems like they're actually going to be important, which is quite intriguing. And that character is Apothecary Gary, the parasitic mushroom a la Parasect from Pokemon, that was a single episode villain back in season 1. In an episode that just seemed like kind of sort of creepy filler. Like, I didn't expect to ever have to think about this character again. Seemed like he was dead and gone. And yet, here he is making like a huge impact on things again. Not even really again, because he didn't make a huge impact last time. He just made an impact. Making a huge impact for the first time. It's super wild. Because in this episode, and while Hop Pop is lamenting that it doesn't seem like anyone else in Amphibia appreciates the growing of plants as much as he does, since the ability to grow plants underground that the Revolution has come up with didn't impress any prospective recruits to the Revolutionary Army. He and his little traveling party get lost in the woods and end up in a hidden town of nothing but people who care a whole heck of a lot about plants. And what I found most interesting about this episode, from like the perspective of someone who likes kid-friendly, creepy imagery, was that immediately, since I have experience with horror movies and horror franchises, I got a vibe that this episode was trying to capture like a Children of the Corn kind of thing, which is funny because Apothecary Gary's first episode was called Children of the Spore, and yet didn't really have, at least I didn't really pick up much of a Children of the Corn vibe from it. Maybe I just need to rewatch the episode, I don't know. And like immediately, as soon as our various heroes wake up in this town, I'm like, man, this is a cult. This is a cult compound. Because it was a cult compound, basically. Like, everybody's wearing pristine cotton white robes and wandering around speaking in quiet, calm tones. It's very obvious what they were aping here. And it made for a very unsettling vibe, and yet Hop Pop feels immediately at home here because the kinds of plants that these people are growing are amazing. They're the kinds of plants that he wishes he could grow. But then they take him to Gary, who is now possessing the body of a beetle, a non-sapient thing, which is important. And he wants revenge on Hop Pop. But the attempt to convince him not to want revenge anymore coincides with some of Andreas's robots showing up, because a spy drone saw the party out recruiting people, and rather than just attacking then and there, it left a tracker, or it turned into a tracker and attached itself to the flagon to try to find the resistance base. But since they stopped here for so long, it thinks this is the resistance base. So when Anne and Hop Pop and the others help protect this place, it convinces Gary that, one, things outside of their little hidden away hamlet are way worse than he thought. And I almost held up 3 fingers. I can count. What are you talking about? And 2, that, maybe they could learn to get along if it's to benefit everybody. So they make a peace agreement, and Gary and his people join the cause too. And normally I'd have a problem with this because Gary controls minds, but the episode makes it a point of, 1, putting him in a non-sapient creature, and 2, saying that these people were already like this when they found and nursed him back to health. They just then subsequently used his powers to find a level of harmony and cohesion with each other that they normally wouldn't have been able to have. He's not actually controlling their minds. They've just become a hive mind because they want to. And, it's not a situation I'd want to live in, for sure, but it's definitely not the brainwashed cult that I thought they were at the beginning, that the episode thematically hinted at them being, so that it could subvert itself. Like, in the end, it's even one of the other town leaders who speaks up with a dissenting opinion to Gary's and convinces Gary to change his mind and actually join up with the rebels. Like, it's weird. It's a weird situation. But I like it. I like that they went this route. They show that a community that's so different than any other community we've seen in the show can be an ally and an asset. It's very interesting. And it also, like, they even bring it up in the episode, it also calls back to that other reference to Gary's spores, which seem to be being used to control the animals of Amphibia and turn them into soldiers for Andreas. Because, again, I'm going to count to 2 again, that suggests a couple of very interesting things. One, that this piece of Gary is not the only one out there, and that 2, if all pieces of Gary are part of the same organism, it's possible that having Gary on the Resistance's side could lead to him reuniting with that other piece of him that they're using to get the spores from, and then Gary would get control of all of the animals of Amphibia that are under Andreas' control now, which might be something that sways the tides against Andreas in the coming battle. Like, it's not guaranteed to happen or anything, but it gives us a potential picture of what that coming conflict might look like. It's a possibility and nothing more, but it's an interesting possibility nonetheless. And I think that's cool. It's neat and intricate without really feeling like it was trying to be, and that's the best kind of Amphibia episode, I think. Also, the area in which this community exists now was once extremely barren, just like the rest of Amphibia is now that Andreas has had his way with it. Which means that these guys are the answer to restoring Amphibia to what it was, or maybe even something better. And the fact that the show is thinking about that, rather than just, like, saying everything magicked back to normal or something, is a cool detail. Right? What's tragic about this, though, is that this excellent episode was overshadowed by The Core and the King, the second episode from this week, where we get Andreas' backstory with Beryl the Brave and Leaf, the small pink frog, who now, more so than ever, I am 100% sure, is an ancestor of the Planters. Not only did the episode immediately previous to this make it clear that at least some of the Planters have a deep love of literally plants, that they don't just grow crops to get by, that it's something in their blood, but Leaf was a gardener. She was like the royal gardener. A gardener being what? If not a planter. Also, she's literally the person who invented that mesmerizing dance that we saw in an earlier episode. Can't remember what it was called, but you remember it. You know what I'm talking about. Couple that with the fact that she looks just like Sprig. And I'm 100% sure now that in the time before she takes the music box to Earth to try to protect it from Andreas getting his hands on it, something that we know that she did, she founded the Planter Clan. And while there was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and this is yet more Amphibia stuff that I want to dig into in its own video, I swear that stuff is coming, guys. I promise it is. It's just both of these shows that I'm reviewing right now, first run, keep giving me more to talk about. I'm going to have to break it down and actually commit to getting some content out, but it is coming one way or the other. What's interesting about it is not only does it show us some of the dynamic between Andreas now and the Core, but it gives more context to what the Core is, first of all, which is super interesting. And it shows us that even before all this started, like, Andreas was definitely a nicer guy back in the day, but he was probably the worst of his little friend group, that being those 3 aforementioned characters, himself and the other 2 aforementioned characters. The framing device of this, though, before I get off on that tangent, is that the Core, which is in control of Marcy's body, and though it's picked up a lot of her personality quirks, Marcy herself is locked away inside its mind. It needs to purge some irrelevant memories, and to do that it needs to reboot itself, So Andreas needs to stick around and help it complete that process. And mentioning superfluous memories like that gets Andreas thinking about the parts of his past that he doesn't like to think about anymore. And we get a flashback to the time that Leaf betrayed him by taking the box and what led up to that. Andreas is about to graduate, not to kingship yet, but his father is about to add his consciousness to the core soon. Seems to be a thing that the royalty of this world just does once they reach a certain age. Which kind of makes the core, like, if you'll pardon the Transformers reference, sort of an evil version of the Matrix of leadership. It's the culmination of the knowledge and experience and even the personality aspects of all of these past great leaders. But because he is graduating towards that role, not literally to kingship itself, but to the role of basically taking over a bunch of the kingly duties in preparation for that, Andreas learns a bit more about what his people do. Like, this is a society that survives on conquest. They make that absolutely clear in this episode. But it's very obvious that, I'll say Andreas and Leaf, because Beryl was delightful in this episode, but I don't think Beryl actually knows anything. He was one of those lovable dumbass kinds of characters. But it doesn't seem like Andreas and Leaf really knew the full extent of what their people do. Because Andreas finds out, seemingly for the first time in his entire life, in this episode, as his father is talking about their next conquest, the Earth, that going out and conquering worlds means that they exterminate populations. Like Leaf, one of the things that she does in the garden is she takes care of the Mossmen that they brought through from another planet. It seems like they bring back samples of the life they find on other planets and then kind of wipe the rest out. And Andreas, Leaf, and Beryl never knew that. Probably because I imagine they don't use actual soldiers to do it. The royal guards probably just guard the palace and the king. And robots are used for everything else. Like the living royal guards, like what Beryl, it turns out the Beryl was, right? But Andreas learns from his father that that's the case. And later on, Leaf learns it from a vision she gets from the music box, because now that Andreas is going to be in charge of actually coordinating the conquests, he has to have access to the music box, and he takes his friends to see it. And she gets a vision from touching all three stones at once. She learns the consequences, the true consequences of what their people do, and she's horrified and decides that they have to stop it. That what they're doing is destroying the balance of the multiversal ecosystem and will eventually lead everything to ruin. And then later, when the king insists that they can't stop because this is their way of life, basically the same argument that he used on his son earlier, and confirms for her that this is a thing that he knew was happening and this is the way things have always been, which is effectively what Andreas learned earlier too. Whereas Andreas accepted it and took the responsibility that his father presented him with upon himself, Leaf becomes a traitor and steals the music box. So she was already a significantly better person than Andreas was. Andreas was already kind of a dick. But at the same time, you can tell that Andreas' father was always very overbearing and probably like emotionally abusive to some level too. He just has that vibe to him. So like, how much do I blame Andreas for this? Like, how much do I blame Leaf for this? Right? She was part of that system too. Just because she recognized how bad that system was at the first opportunity doesn't make her blameless in everything that system perpetuated, right? So like, I feel like I need to give the character another chance. If they shoot for a redemption arc with Andreas, I think I need to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? But I definitely feel like, because I'm one of those people who feels like if you're part of a system and you just never, like, you genuinely never had the opportunity to understand how horrible that system was, if you then come to understand that and you change as a person, then you're effectively in the clear, right? I'm no longer going to hold you responsible for what that system perpetuates and has perpetuated, because it's clear that you never would have been a part of that willingly, right? And Leaf is that kind of person. Andreas is not. That's really what it comes down to here. Don't really know where Beryl stands because, again, he's a lovable idiot. But he definitely seemed torn up about what happened. He definitely wanted to remain loyal to both of his friends. And it would be interesting to know, and I do, like, there's obviously more to his story, and I hope we find out more later. I am curious to know who he would have eventually sided with in the end from a moral standpoint. I think most intriguing about all of this, though, is that after Andreas witnesses Leaf's betrayal, we see the root of all of the race separation between the frogs, toads, and newts that exists in modern Amphibia now. When Andreas says we have to start keeping the frogs in their place, they could all turn out to be traitors, they could all betray us like she did. And then on top of that, as punishment for hesitating to hurt their friend, he dismisses Beryl as a palace guard and sends him out to start watching over the various frog towns and villages as their protector and overseer, to like make sure they don't get out of line, but also to keep them safe. And like, you could see that, you could see how that's the beginning of toads being regents over frog villages, and the frogs being so separated from the newts and the toads as a result of them needing to be put in their place, according to Andreas. It's just, all of the racism and bigotry and bullying and probably some other B words I'm not thinking of. It all started right here. And it was all because Andreas, when faced with the reality of what his people were doing, couldn't stand up to his father at the request of his friend. And there's also some bullshit in there where the king convinced him that his friends were going to try to take advantage of him now that he was becoming more powerful, and he actually believed that, which shows he's gross in that way too. But all because he wasn't able to actually stand up for what was right. All of this division happened. It's stunning in how realistic it feels, how possible it feels, and how much all of it makes sense. So we could surmise a lot of this, right? But seeing it all fall into place like this was so satisfying. And then in the end, after Darcy, like, the Corps officially calls itself Darcy in this episode for the first time, after Darcy is rebooted, having completed the purging process, it speaks to Andreas as if Andreas is its son, using his father's voice, which means his father is in there, and the personality of his father can come out on its own, separate from the rest of the crap in the Corps. And that might be why Andreas is still so beaten down by this thing. Which is why, again, I feel like we need to give this character the benefit of the doubt that he could still change. I still think he's a scumbag. That's really what I'm feeling right now about this guy. I've also seen people online saying that, oh, this means that Marcy's not going to be in there anymore. Her memories are going to have been deleted, and they're going to have to find a way to restore her memories. And maybe that's the case. Maybe I'm misreading a little bit. But I don't think that's what the episode was trying to tell us at all. The Corps said something about how it needed to get rid of redundant memories. Why would Marcy's memories be categorized as redundant? Wouldn't that just be memories of experiences shared, at least mostly in their entirety, by different people who were uploaded to the Corps, and therefore it doesn't need all of the memories from every single one of them? Wouldn't Marcy's memories be mostly unique, since she comes from another world? Wouldn't it want her memories, so that it would have a better understanding of Earth and how to conquer it, which is the Corps', that's the next step in the Corps' plan. That's what the Corps plans to do next, is begin the invasion of Earth in earnest. Like, why take Marcy's body if the Corps doesn't want Marcy's experiences to inform it? Not only that, but it said it has Marcy locked away from the rest of the stuff in its big computery brain. So I don't even know that it could delete her memories. And some of its own at the same time. And it was clear that it was deleting at least, like, some of what it was deleting was information that had already been in the core this entire time. Like, what the core literally says is...
So we need to purge our system of some excess data, redundant memories, that sort of thing.
And I do not think that that implies that it was getting rid of Marcy. I think Marcy is going to be relatively unharmed even after this process. You know, putting aside the fact that she's literally being possessed by a computer. So I disagree with those people that there's a need now for them to find a way to restore Marcy's memories. But who knows? It's possible. It's possible that they will. We learned a couple other things here that are of note. That it was Andreas who commissioned the portrait of himself, Beryl, and Leaf. That Andreas's size is almost definitely natural. Like I surmised a while ago that maybe he grew so large over time because of exposure to energy from the core. But his father, well, his father... Actually, I think that there still might be some basis for that, actually. Because his father, I was going to say his father was so large and he was older. But his father had also been exposed to the core for a really long time. So I don't know. Let's just say it's possible that his specific race of newt just gets that large naturally, but it's still possible that that's not the case. Which means that it was absolutely pointless for me to go on that tangent at all. We also find out definitively here, though... Oh, before I forget. The Moss Man that Anne bumped into in the wild is one that Leaf used to help her escape the castle. That was a cool detail. But most interestingly of all is they weren't connected to the stones. Like, there's been a theory in the fandom for a long time that specifically Andreas, Beryl, and Leaf were connected to the stones. That each one of them was connected to one of the stones, and we know now that that's not the case, because the first direct exposure to any of them had to the stones was when Leaf touched the stones and got that vision, which included the Olm's prophecy. It was part of her vision, which also says something interesting. Like, someone had to write down what the music box did for that information to make it into a book. And it's also been a theory in the fandom for a long time that that person was Leaf herself, and that she may have set things in motion for that book to end up in Marcy's hands at just the right time, for Marcy to end up taking herself and her friends to Amphibia, so that all this stuff could happen. And that's definitely more possible than ever now. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we get more flashbacks of these characters and find out that Leaf went to the Olms and spoke to the Mother of Olms and learned the full prophecy and then did her best to put it in motion later, knowing that even though that would give Andreas the potential to invade other worlds again, that it would also lead to his defeat, like his permanent defeat and the teardown of this whole system, because things were still not great in Amphibia, like between the time that she took the music box and the time that Andreas got it back. Things still sucked for the people there. She would want to try to restore things to a state where the people of Amphibia weren't conquerors, but they also didn't have a bunch of class divides and shit. And bringing the girls over, even though it would make stuff worse for a while, might actually end with things being better. Like, being the best version of things possible, right? And if anyone would know that, it would be her, because of what she saw. So it's possible that that prophecy that we just saw in Mother of Olms is not really a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that's when you're told a prophecy and trying to keep it from coming to pass is what makes it happen to you. But it's like a paradox. It's like a paradox that because Leaf saw the prophecy, the stuff that the prophecy was prophesying ends up happening. Right? Like, I could see them going that route, and it would be really interesting if they did. It's just a really good episode. It's a really good landmark episode for this show. This is, without a doubt, one of the most important episodes we've gotten so far. And since it flat out confirms that shit's about to get real, I'm looking forward, man, to that happening. Let me tell you. It's going to be real cool. As per usual, though, guys, what did you think of Root of Evil and the Core and the King? If you have seen them, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video Share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content. Subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias as well as the many ways you could help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.